Please have a seat, everyone. And thank you all very much for coming to this concluding panel this afternoon for the World Economic Forum here in Dalian. We are very fortunate to have an all-star lineup of people to talk about the many trade issues going on now around the Pacific Rim and also in the Indian Ocean. Before I start, I just want to introduce, just so everyone knows, we're going to be using two acronyms and we're going to try to avoid all the others. So the two that you need to know for this conversation are going to be the CPTPP, which is simply the reworked version of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So 11 of the 12 countries around the Pacific Rim that signed up for the Trans-Pacific Partnership have gone ahead, including, for example, Canada. The other acronym you're going to need to know is RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which is essentially ASEAN plus 6 countries that are trying to reach a new regional free trade agreement here in Asia by the end of this year. With those two acronyms out of the way, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We're very lucky to have Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. We also have Mary Ng, the Minister of Small Business and Export Promotion of Canada. We have Niinami, who is the CEO of Suntory Holdings and also a member of the Japanese cabinet. And finally, we have Sushant, who is the head of global partnerships at Agility in Germany and an expert in the very complicated logistics arrangements that are needed as companies try to figure out how are they going to adapt to these new trading arrangements across Asia and around the Pacific and across the Indian Ocean. Sheikh Hasina, maybe I can start with you, please. Bangladesh is a popular country right now. A lot of people are trying to figure out how it will fit in, whether it's you have potential friends in India, in Japan, in the United States, and here in China, they're very interested in Bangladesh because of the Belt and Road Initiative. As you look at the landscape, how do you see Bangladesh's trade relationships changing in the next few years?
Well, dear moderator, the participants, audience, let me share my thoughts on collaboration and cooperation in Asia. It is widely recognized that the Indo-Pacific region is the most dynamic in the world. Equally, Bay of Bengal, home for 1.5 billion people, is a rich and growing region. People living around our Bay of Bengal have so much potential to develop and grow. There is a tendency to look at Indo-Pacific in respect of trade or security issues. We sometimes look just in terms of the capacity of a few large economies on their needs, but we must address the key concern of smaller countries or relatively weaker economies for our collective journey and sustainable world. Over a 5-decade of my journey in politics tells me that any initiative in Indo-Pacific should include the following. First, create an environment of peace, harmony, stability of all countries. Second, focus on entire aspects of sustainable development. Third, engage countries based on mutual trust and natural respect for mutual benefit. Fourth, focus on wealth creation for all. Development must be inclusive. Fifth, create the competition, not rivalry. Well, when I first assumed office as Prime Minister in 1996, Bangladesh resolved a most challenging issue of sharing Ganges river water with India. We amicably delimited our maritime boundary with Myanmar and India, and now, well, Bangladesh resolved the water sharing bilaterally. We didn't include any third party, India and Bangladesh. And also we had problem with land boundary. That also we resolved with India. And we amicably delimited our maritime boundary. with Myanmar and India. And now Bangladesh and India are joining hands to uniquely develop our trans-boundary river navigation. I always believe that in the spite of differences in size and capacity compared to India, Bangladesh can only secure her peace and security through sustainable development and connectivity. We are for a rule-based system. Well, Bangladesh, China, India, and Myanmar. Already we have signed an agreement for establishing connectivity, PCIM economic corridor. In other part, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and India, BBIN. We also signed an agreement to establish our connectivity. So with all the neighboring countries, we have very good relationship. And well, yes, geopolitics will always be a part of life, but we have to carefully appreciate and balance issues. We cannot trade off long-term interest for short-term gains. A cooperative yet competitive environment among all countries is the insurance of our shared prosperity. Poverty is our big enemy, what I feel. We always should think about our people, how to eradicate poverty. And we should increase the purchasing power of our people. That is our aim. I believe that if the business people want to do business, then they should also think about it. Nowadays, one country cannot go alone. This is a global village. But with neighboring country, yes, with neighbor country, some problem may remain. But it can be solved amicably, bilaterally, through discussion. We can do it. Even inside the country, in our country, we have problem with our Chittagong Hill tracts. There are insurgency activities. But when I become Prime Minister, I just discuss with them, we signed peace agreement, we solve it. That way, at present you know that from Myanmar, in our country, the Rohingya, almost 1.1 million people took shelter. We didn't quarrel with Myanmar, rather we started discussion with them that how they can take their citizens back to their country. Yes, of course, in that case, we need support. So with all these countries, we have our good relationship. So I always give importance that actually in Bangladesh, as you know, geographically or land boundary, we have only 147 square kilometer land. And I have 160.55 million population. In a small land, so big population, I have to feed these people, I have to ensure better life, and I have to fulfill their basic needs. But what I am trying to do. And our foreign policy is very clear, friendship to all, marriage to none. Now, I can say that we have very good relationship with all the countries, India, China, even Japan, even other, all our Bay of Bengal, and also Pacific Rim. We have very good relationship all over the world. 2009, I formed government. Since now, no one country can say that we quarrel with anybody. Country to country problem may remain, but I always believe that that is their problem. But I always give more importance to economic emancipation of our people. So that way, I think the relationship, we have wonderful relationship. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Hasina. I appreciate that. Mary, as we look at CPTPP and the decision for countries to go ahead without the United States participation, at least for now, how is that already making a difference for Canada, whether it's in terms of investment or the exports? Are you seeing additional business activity as a result of that?
Yes, we are. We are. Canada's one of the first 6 countries that ratified the CPTPP, and some of the early numbers I saw, two to speak of. In Japan, we are seeing that our exports to Japan have increased since the ratification of the CPTPP, and a country like Vietnam, who is part of the CPTPP, we are seeing, they have seen and experienced an increase in their exports into, into Canada. So absolutely, we are already starting to see some early benefits. And just to give people a context about exporting by Canadian companies, we are we're a country that exports and that largely does a lot of business, of course, with our neighbor to the south, the United States, and where we want to be able to grow and to enable our companies to grow and to grow more into the global marketplace is into the Asia Pacific area, and CPTPP absolutely provides us that opportunity. So we are sort of doubling down on diversifying our trade, giving our companies more opportunities to grow into that global marketplace, so into countries like Japan, Australia, Singapore, Vietnam, and helping our companies to become even more export ready than they are today, so that as we grow, we can take advantage of, the way I talk about it is, it's 500 million new customers in this region alone through this one agreement. So absolutely we are seeing benefits.
Thank you, Mary. Tech Niinami, I guess you asked the best question this afternoon when Premier Li Keqiang met with a group of business people. And your question involved what are the implications for supply chains of some of the current issues we're seeing, including the US-China trade war. Do you at Suntory and more broadly in Japanese industry see a broad relocation of supply chains in response to recent trade tensions, as well as in response to the development of new trade agreements like TPP and now RCEP possibly as well?
Well, first of all, the trend of the relocating the production lines from China has begun not because of the trade tensions, because of the high labor costs of China. So that had begun much earlier stage. And we've been shifting toward Bangladesh, Vietnam, so many countries in East, out of China. Though some still stay, but I think business leaders in Japan are wondering what to do. Could be, I would say, on hold to invest more to China or not, because every day people are wondered by somebody tweeting. So all in all, I think the current tensions between the two countries, US and China, is truth. Postponement of the negotiations. So I would say we are not very, very positive to further invest to China yet. But then which countries? Bangladesh, maybe India. So we have to reconsider supply chain anyway, for the sake of the safety of the supply chain globally. So we should not heavily concentrate on one country. That's what we learned. And we, Suntory, has been in China, and we've been increasing our presence. But we are shifting more and more. We are putting more resources to other countries as well, making use of CPTPP, and it could be RCEP, and we have the trade pacts with the many regions. So we want to capitalize on those trade pacts with a high standard.
Okay. Thank you. Sushant, I guess a similar question, because you're advising so many companies and you have the visibility through logistics into the supply chains. Are you seeing a lot of companies actually make decisions to realign supply chains now, perhaps partly as a result of the rising labor costs in China that Tech mentioned, but also the trade pacts? Are they actually realigning them now, or are they still mostly at the stage of thinking about them?
Well, I'd like to give you a simple answer, and then I'll give you maybe a bit more detailed answer. The simple answer is yes. And when you're a company like Agility, which is both in infrastructure as well as logistics in over 100 countries, you do in fact get a lot of frontline market intelligence and a lot of feedback from customers. But the challenge now becomes, what kind of customers are we speaking about? We can put our fingers on the pulse of the global economy and feel whether it's going up or down with high or low blood pressure. But for us, the lifeblood in that global economy are clearly SMEs. And why? Because SMEs make up 95% of global business. They deliver over 50% of global GDP, and in most economies contribute to over 2/3 of formal employment. So for us, that question really is, do these trade agreements deliver for SMEs? And to your question as to the strategies and cost implications, we're also recognizing that those enterprises that may have a more regionalized or globalized supply chain are able to do that, and perhaps more quickly and agilely than others. But for a small and medium enterprise, that's not a switch that can be made overnight. So for us, it's very clear that tariffs, protectionism, they create friction for businesses. Free trade, on the other hand, seeks the path of least resistance. So for any one of our customers, for any business of any size that is seeking to grow, that is seeking to innovate, that is seeking to create jobs, that is seeking to empower women, it's inevitable that they will follow the path of free trade. I think the good news is, coming out of CPTPP, which is an inspiration also now for RCEP and possibly for any other trade agreement, is the fact that they explicitly mention SMEs. There's a chapter dedicated to it. There are initiatives by the governments to raise awareness about the ways that businesses can benefit. And ultimately, by taking those measures to remove friction, whether by simplification, having one set of rules that apply to all the ratifying economies, that's allowing you to reduce transaction costs and to raise margins. So again, there's a simple answer, yes, but it doesn't apply to everyone depending on the size of the business.
Okay. Thank you. Sheikh Hasina, I guess everybody in this part of the world is trying to think about how they manage their relations with China. And on the one hand, you compete with China. How do you balance, on the one hand, that you are competing with China in areas like textiles and apparel? You're, in fact, gaining a lot of jobs that used to be in these low-wage industries. At the same time, you're trying through Belt and Road Initiative or through discussions with them to balance the investments they're making, the infrastructure projects. How do you balance engagement with China with, at the same time, the sort of the regional constraints that you face and the trade constraints you face?
As I mentioned earlier, that we have wonderful relationship with every country, and we need more investment, and that's why we open up our economy. Especially when I become Prime Minister, I open everything to private sector, so that more investment can and our country can make progress. With China, we have wonderful relationship, no doubt about it. Yes, China is investing in a large way. And I can tell you that our external debt is around 14.3% of GDP. Clearly, it is a sign of a healthy economy. And we are always, China is involved in some of our mega projects, like our Padma Bridge or Kadofuli Tunnel or power generation and even infrastructure development. They are engaged there. They have investment. So, I feel that we feel no problem, because Japan is also investing in our country in a big way. They are also building power plant and other like metro rail and many other important projects, even our airport, the third terminal, and many other way. So as India. And that way now we are inviting more people to come. So with China, we have, well, actually, I feel that our economy is growing. This year, we achieved our GDP 8.1%. And we predicted that the next fiscal year, already it started from yesterday, we will achieve 8.2%. So side by side, our inflation rate, point to point, it is 5.5. And also our per capita income, we increased 1,909 US dollar. So when the investment come and when we deal with our friendly country, I feel no problem or nothing. And about the debt, I know many people, many times they talk about the debt trap, but I have a simple answer that as long as these mega projects are in our people's interest, has the right pay off the negotiated rightly, we must not be worried about it. And about the debt disbursement, Bangladesh never failed. We never failed. Nobody can say that we failed. So I see that there is, well, you should not have any doubt about it. And because I told you that our foreign policy is very clear, friendship to all, allies to none, and we maintain that. And now we have good, neighboring relationship. And we need development. We need development for our people. I want to build up my country as a poverty-free country. By this time, from LDC, we graduated to developing country, middle-income country, and we have to maintain it. So with everybody, we try to attract more investment. I am establishing 100 special economic zone. And there the SME and also other small or big or different type of industry, foreign or domestic investment can be accommodated. We open up our economy for everybody. And we are inviting people. And we have already established an SME foundation also. And in SME foundation, I think you will be very happy to know that for women, we give a special consideration so that the women entrepreneurship should grow up in our country. That way, with China, no problem.
That's a very clear answer. I guess everybody looks at these huge projects like the new bridge across the Ganges that you're building, the huge tunnel under the river at Chittagong. Bangladesh is in almost a unique position among developing countries right now in that you're growing so fast that you can sustain more debt without your debt GDP ratio going up much. So you have a low debt GDP ratio. But do you worry that even though you are growing fast, even though you have the low debt to GDP ratio, is it tough for Bangladesh to accommodate so much infrastructure investment at the same time coming in from so many different sources and maybe indirectly running up the debt, even if it's not high as a percentage of GDP?
The one project that is Padma Bridge, 6.5 kilometer, and it's a double-decker rail and road. We are building this bridge with our own money. We are not taking money from any other people. But the construction work is doing by China. So it means it proved that, yes, we can do some mega project by ourselves. That economy strength already Bangladesh has achieved. So with debt problem, it will not affect our economy. That I can ensure you, because our economy is very strong now. And most of our budget, we prepare our budget with our own money. Our foreign investment, we have like PPP, that means public-private partnership, or G2G basis, or so in many ways. So I feel that you don't need to worry about it. As long as I am here, definitely I will continue this development for my people, for my country, that I can ensure.
For those
Yeah.
of you who haven't heard about it, the project over the Ganges is one of the real engineering feats going on right now because the soil there is very difficult, going down to a great depth of mud to try to get the foundations. And to try to go over that is requiring, I think it's one of the world's largest cranes has been erected for part of that project. So it's really an incredible engineering project. With that, why don't I turn to you, Mary? As Canada has had more strains in its relationship with China, are you seeing a real refocusing of the Canadian business community, whether it's canola, whether it's pork, whether it's the detention of two of your compatriots? Are we seeing even maybe some trade diversion here towards CPTPP as a result of having the trade agreement going into place in one direction and having tensions in another direction?
Well, we have, we made a decision, when we ratified CETA with the European Union, and then we ratified CPTPP, and of course we've just renegotiated, the USMCA, or in Canada they call it CUSMA, because we lead in with Canada, but essentially the new NAFTA. Trade diversification is something that we have doubled down on, and the U.S. is Canada's largest trading partner. China is our second largest trading partner. But let me just give you a statistic. Only 12%, for example, of our Canadian small and medium-sized businesses actually are exporting today. And of that, 70% of that 12% is to one market, and it's to the U.S. So diversification is a real opportunity for Canadian businesses, and which is why the government has put a significant investment in trade diversification, so that we could take advantage of the trade agreements that Canada currently has. To give you just sort of another frame on this, I mean, Canada is a G7 country. It has a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. We have access to about 60% of the world's economy through our multilateral agreements and our bilateral agreements. So, what does that actually really mean when I talk to businesses back home? It's access to 1.5 billion customers in the global marketplace. So we're a trading country. We're not yet a nation of traders. So diversification is really important because that diversification and getting our businesses more export ready to be able to take advantage of the trade agreements that are there. Sushant earlier talked about trade agreements having access points and ease of access so that small and medium-sized businesses can take advantage of it. We are really doing the work of helping with that particular readiness. So, getting our businesses ready, helping them grow, helping them scale up into the global marketplace, making those trade agreements not more than just documents, but really tools to which it enables our businesses to actually grow into these markets is something that we are very, very focused on. So we will continue to do business with with our largest trading partners. But we must also look at those opportunities elsewhere. The other thing I would say is that Canada is a very diverse country. So our Prime Minister says this often, diversity is really Canada's strength. We have a lot of comfort in dealing with the rest of the world because many of us come from the rest of the world, and we are in Canada. So the opportunity to really take advantage of the agreements that we have on the books right now is really a strength, we believe, to help grow our companies, grow our GDP, create great jobs, in Canada, great middle-class jobs. So that's a bit of our focus.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary. Tech, everyone's very interested right now in the RCEP. I was just in Osaka for the Group of 20 summit, and I had a chance to talk to one of the senior Chinese Foreign Ministry officials there. And he said on the record, we want to accelerate the pace of RCEP, and we want, as China, to get it done by the end of this year. Wearing both, I guess, your Japanese government or cabinet hat as well as your Suntory hat, do you think a deal by the end of this year is possible on RCEP? And if there is a deal, is it likely to include India on the one hand, which seems to want a very limited deal that does not require deep reductions in tariffs, and is it also possible at the other end to include Australia and New Zealand, which seem to want total free trade? Where is RCEP going?
Well, I'm not optimistic about that deal to be materialized in this November. Maybe we need more time. It's a huge challenge, but the RCEP is the embodiment of the spirit of the free trade shared among all the member countries in Osaka. So definitely we have to push forward, but there are some challenges that we have to overcome. I think I would say 4 points. Again, India. Definitely we have to bring in India, considering the potential market growth and the growth of the region. I would say it's the Pacific Rim. I would say probably Asia, Oceania, for example. I think we should capitalize on the potential. Then definitely we have to bring in India. But India has a problem, which is a huge trade deficit with China. And they are so afraid of the growing deficit if they agreed upon the lowering the tariffs. You know, Chinese goods are flooding. I think we should understand how to tackle the imbalance of the trade deficit. We have to work on it. And we have to think about maybe probably how to increase the investment to India. And Japan may be able to play a key role, such as infrastructure investment and so forth. We got to work together. And second point is Chinese policy, not to include the 3 countries. They proposed, I hear, that ASEAN plus 3. 3 means excluding Australia, New Zealand, India. Is that a good thing? Because the trade pact always has the strong policy, solid policy of inclusion. That's the fairness, that's the foundation of trade pacts. So I believe that is very important. So in doing so, definitely we have to work on with China. China, I believe, is ready to play a leadership role in the region like Asia and Oceania Pacific Rim. I think it's a matter of the readiness of China, but I'd like China to play a leadership role with Japan to resolve a lot of issues. Now is the time for us to ask China to come up to play a leadership role. I think they are already the country with the GDP per capita 10,000. I think they can do that, and we work together. I mean, Japan and China should work together to maximize the potential of the market growth, and that will be, I mean, Asian economic power will become 50% of GDP in 2050. But Indian participation is a prerequisite. And again, going back to the Australia and New Zealand, inclusion always is very important. And the third point is how to elevate toward the high standards. I believe we should start from lower standards in case of RCEP, but with the condition that we will elevate the standards toward the level of the CPTPP. And plus, we should bring more countries like Bangladesh. So we have to be open. Fourth, definitely enforcement. And who will guarantee enforcement? I like to see the mutual trust among the leadership. And probably RCEP countries should hold the annual event, just like to G20 top summit, to talk to each other, to create, to resolve the issues. Definitely, we will, come up with a lot of issues. But RCEP is definitely embodiment of the spirit of the trade issue. Free trade.
That's one of the more cautious assessments on whether or not it's going to happen this year. Now, there have been some signs that maybe China is more willing to move on RCEP. And the evidence for that would be that China cut its average tariffs last autumn from 9.8% to 7.5%. That's taking average tariffs and just a straight average based on the number of harmonized tariff schedule categories, not trying to trade weight it. But they are beginning to cut in some areas, and they're clearly nervous in Beijing about where their trade relationship is going with the United States. So have you, coming out of the G20, for example, where there are all kinds of discussions on the sidelines, seen even in the last few days a greater willingness from China to try to move this along? When you say you need to see more leadership from China, are you starting to see that in the last few days as it looks like the US-China trade war is going to go on, or are you seeing it sort of, there's still the positions are the same that they've been on RCEP?
It's been so evident that China wants to accommodate and I'm collaborative toward the free trade. It's for sure. But again, I mentioned about the hold, on hold, especially like a tech area, space. So that is a very important area. So in case of goods, I think they are very much aggressive to be a global citizen, to support the free trade. As for technology, it's a huge issue. And we can't cut off the global supply chain for the technology. So it's a huge issue. And then I think that's why I mentioned we should start RCEP with the lower standards than TPP, because it's a lot better than nothing, and work together. And we should make a path of the dialogue toward the high standards in the future.
Thank you. Sushant, I'm going to come to you, but first, after you have your drink of water, Sheikh Hasina, that was a perfect segue from tech to ask you, what about RCEP? Bangladesh is not part of the RCEP negotiations. I know that there has been some nervousness among other countries in Asia that Bangladesh has become so competitive in some sectors that it has a combination of low wages. Now you're beginning to address infrastructure, and that worries them. There have been questions about whether or not there could be labor protections in an agreement with Bangladesh. How do you see RCEP, and will Bangladesh at some point try to join RCEP?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Will you want to join the regional comprehensive economic partnership
sure.
later? You will.
Yeah, thank you. Well, as you know that in the past 10 years, my government is running the country. We always give importance to cooperation with other country. And I feel that it is very necessary to join the regional cooperation or beyond it. It is very, very important for economic development. And with all the countries, I told you earlier that we have wonderful relationship. Like India, yes, we our next door neighbor, but during our liberation war, about 10 million people took shelter as a refugee. They look after them. We cannot forget that gesture. And also our liberation war, they also shed their blood. Japan is our great friendly country, and also Japan is investing in our country, and since our liberation they are supporting Bangladesh, and we have many similarity, and we always appreciate Japan's role. And So are China. They are also our friendly country. They are also contributing. And we always give importance the regional comprehensive economic partnership or CPTPP. Nowadays, in recent world order, it is very, very important. It's very, very important what I feel. Yes, Bangladesh is doing better. We are developing very fast, but it must be sustainable. If we want to do it sustainable, definitely we should join together and work together. And that's why we always give importance, because we have some target. We want to go further. We want to develop our country more. Now, yes, we are graduated to developing country, but I feel that next 10 years, within another 10 years, Bangladesh is likely to become 25th largest economy globally. To fulfill that, I feel that it is very, very important that we should work together, and it is important. So even we have also approached ASEAN for their partnership. Global relationship should be focused the economic emancipation of the people. No conflict, no fighting, nothing. We don't want to see the war or any. We are not ready to engage with, fighting or arms, conflict or anything.
Right.
Only one point. We want peace, we want harmony, we want cooperation with each other. We should think about the people, each and every country, the downtrodden people, the poor people. We must think about them, about their life, and for the future generation, what we will left for them, how their life will be. What I feel that the next generation, they should not suffer from the present conflict situation. They need a better life. They need a peaceful life. They need progress, because the world is changing. So, for future generation, what we can do? We must think about it. But if we continue the conflict or anything, then there will be no development. But this is my feeling. I think I am the oldest one here. I have my experience, yes. And we suffered a lot. Bangladesh, as you know, personally, I lost all my family members except my sister. And our country was ruled by military dictator for long years. So our country couldn't develop. Only when I become Prime Minister, we make little progress. Then again, with our people, I couldn't come back to power for 7 years, our people suffer. But from 2009 to 2019, within very short period of time, now we make tremendous progress. Well, I really appreciate my people. They are so cooperative. So that's why I feel that this Bangladesh is always ready to join.
Okay.
With global cooperation. Yes, I am ready to join this RCEP or CPTP. CPTPP. We are ready to join.
We'll see when the invitation comes. It would be, I think first we're going to try to get the agreement, but that would be really interesting if Bangladesh were to join. It would really expand that market and the labor force within RCEP. The next question is going to be for Sushant, but before I ask him one more question, I want all of you to start thinking about your questions, because after I just quickly ask a question of Sushant, and we're sort of running low on time here, I'm going to turn to all of you. So let me just quickly ask you, Sushant. At Agility, are you seeing any companies that are already doing serious studies of the effects RCEP would have or on their logistics and supply chains, or is it so unclear what it would look like and when it's ever going to happen that people don't even put it into the long-term sort of maybe category of things that they put in their business scenarios? I mean, how do they do that planning?
Yeah. No, I think it's a great question, and I have to come back to that point I made before, that it varies. It depends really on the size and resources an organization has to take it to that extent of research and understanding it. But what I'd like to do is just connect maybe some different phenomena that we've been discussing here, because we've been looking at the topic through the view of countries and companies, but I think we need to add the view of consumers as well. And I'll give a little tongue twister to illustrate the point. If we think about the relationship between flowers, fish, and phones, we've observed in the last months, for example, that around Mother's Day, we had to have additional air freight capacity to cope with the demand for flowers that were exported from Ecuador and Colombia. Those same air freighters return to South America with electronic components which are assembled in Manaus to make mobile phones, which then qualify as made in Brazil for sale in Brazil. The demand for fish from Chile has been so much that we see, again, more need for uplift from Chile to Asian economies that want more salmon. And if you look also now beyond that at the e-commerce market, a study by Morgan Stanley says that between 2017 and 2026, the e-commerce market in India will grow 1,200%. In the Middle East, where Agility is headquartered, already between 2016 and 2020, the e-commerce market is more than doubled. So now the question becomes, for those businesses that have to look at these trade agreements, how do I tap into these new demand patterns, these new trade patterns? How do I tap into these opportunities? And I think people like Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and Minister Ng are working tirelessly to ensure that there's more awareness. On our part, we've done our homework and have understood by surveying our customers, in particular the SMEs, and know that once they overcome that hurdle of understanding these agreements and how they can reap the benefits of them, the next question is, if I have business partners, I have markets and consumers I can tap into, how do I now move my goods in a cost-effective way? And so we're trying with our digital logistics platform, Shippa, to create that transparency. So there are many steps, Keith, in order to get to the state where we want to be, where people are benefiting. And I think that the final point I would make too is that on top of the logistics infrastructure, the knowledge infrastructure, there comes then also the physical infrastructure and the investments that the economies will make to support and facilitate these supply chains.
I'll never forget one example of infrastructure. You mentioned flowers, and I did a story 10 years ago out of Kunming. They, meaning in this case the provincial government there of that corner of southwestern China, built a huge freight airport, put a 12-lane road with a cold chain as a result to keep the flowers cold, and were able to outcompete Singapore. They were able to outcompete Malaysia in the Singaporean market for roses, even with all the jet fuel costs and so forth associated with flying it in, because they had the infrastructure and the logistics and the ability to keep the flowers cold en route. So with that, we had somebody who really wanted to ask a question here. Do we have a microphone, please, for our guest? And then we've got a second question over here. Well, we got all kinds of questions, so I'm going to ask you to ask your questions succinctly, please. Oh, well, okay, we got one here, and then I'll come to you in the middle. Go ahead, please. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, this is Sebastian Groh. I'm from Soulshare, a social entrepreneur in Bangladesh, and I have a question for the Honorable Prime Minister. Your country is among the most prone to the adverse effects of climate change, and yet, or maybe because of it, it holds a world record in distributed solar, which referred to as solar home systems. So my question is, as a champion of change and a new champion of the new world, what's your secret behind it? And also, what's your vision to build on that for the future in renewable energies? Because a strong signal to the world of that, and I saw you last time at the COP in Marrakesh, where you signed as part of the Vulnerable Forum to go to 100% renewables by 2050. So what's your vision towards that?
Well, in our country, as because always energy is energy. The power is power. Power needs to develop the country. But as you know that our country, yes, there was a time we have a scarcity of electricity. So when I formed government, first time when I became prime minister, what I found that we had only 1,600 megawatt power generation we had. So immediately I opened it up to the private sector. And then I started to give any source we can adapt to generate our power. Then, well, I couldn't continue for a long time, 5 years. After 5 years, I couldn't come back to power. But by this time, I increased it 4,300 megawatt. Then after 8 years, when I become prime minister again, second time, then I found that it reduced to 3,200, something like that. Then, well, for renewable energy in our country, there are many, some hilly area, some islands, some other area. So all those areas now we have started giving the solar energy. So that up to our village level, rural level, the people should get the benefit of it. So now almost more than 5 million solar energy panel already we established, and even our member of parliaments, I have instructed everybody that each and every member of parliament, they should take initiative that the remoted area, they should provide solar panel to the people so that they can get the electricity. By this time, yes, now we can produce more than 21,000 megawatt power, and we cover 93% of our country within 10 years. We are doing more, but now because the people's economic condition is growing very fast, purchasing power is increasing, their per capita income increasing, now they use electricity more and more, the demand is also increasing. So renewable energy, it is very, very important. And I feel that climate change is a big problem in our country, though we are not responsible for emission, but we are not emitter, but we are sufferers. And that all the developed countries, they created this cause. But to save our country, already I think Bangladesh was the first country we have adapted our program, and we set up a trust fund with our own money. That time we didn't receive any support from other country, but with our own money, we have set up a trust fund, and we have adapted some program so that we can save our country from this climate change. And also we make people aware about it, and we have taken many steps so that anything happen, but we can save our country. And for disaster management, by this time, Bangladesh achieved much, so they know, our people also very much aware. And we started renewable energy. We also tried some other way, but our Bangladesh, because of our geographical position, it is a island. There are so many small islands we have. So each and every area we are providing this solar panel, and also encouraging people. Only thing, the panel is so expensive. Actually, solar panel is very expensive, but the price is going down, but it does not last for a long time. Then that is also another problem. But I think globally people should think about it, and through research, how you can reduce the price and also you can make available to the common people. But now we are helping our people to establish more solar energy. And solar energy, it is not only the panel they can use, we can also convert into in the general line. That also we have established. That we are working, yeah.
Thank you, Sheikh Hasina. We've got another question right here in the middle. The gentleman, second one in there, who's been.
非常感谢我
Thank you very much. I come from Zhejiang Daily Journal. It's a Zhejiang local newspaper. Thank you very much. I come from Zhejiang local newspaper. Our province of Zhejiang is famous for SMEs and private sector, but we also have good private sector company like Alibaba or Geely in our province. But in this background of trade war and a less the dynamism of world economy, we are also facing a lot of SME problem. My question is for Chinese SME, what do you think that Chinese SME should do to survive and to develop themselves?
Question, please, for us?
Yeah, no, I think, again, it comes down to diversification and that the demand patterns have to be studied very carefully because they are changing. And again, if I come back to that air freight example, we see an increase in the number of mail shipments that are going from China to Latin America. So once the knowledge is there, once you overcome that hurdle of knowing where you might uncover new markets, it enables you to diversify and de-risk in a way, to not be reliant on one particular market.
And over here, quickly, we've got time for one last question, then I'm going to need to wrap us up here with apologies. Well,
I have a question from Prime Minister Hasina. I'm Ryan Takeshita from Huffington Post, Japan. So whenever Japan tries to enter trade corporations, there's a huge public debate that in global cooperation or global competition, there's winners and there's also losers. So do you have the same debate in Bangladesh that if you entered the global competition, a lot of small and medium-sized businesses or local farmers will have damage to their businesses?
and just briefly, we'll ask one more question. We'll combine the two if you could, ma'am. Just a moment, we'll ask. So we have one of the women here asking a question. Please go ahead.
My question's to Niinami, and I was just wondering, since it's the time for Industry 4.0 and also Leadership 4.0, both actually indicate inclusion. And if that be the case, then since Bangladesh has the highest number of green factories, Bangladesh has highest female empowerment because of the ready-made garment industry. I'm sorry, I'm biased because I represent that industry. I think, would it be fair for us to expect preferential trade preference from you over any other country? Because ASEAN actually imports...
Thank you. Okay, we've got 1 minute, 45 seconds. I'm going to let you go first on how do you deal with the winners and losers, making sure in trade that there's a consensus.
Yes, actually, I can tell you one thing. In Bangladesh, I don't know, I never heard about it, who is loser, who is winner, but because we give importance to all, the big industry or SME foundation or small industry, because we need more investments. So as much as it can come, we give importance to that. But in our country, she is a business woman. There are many of them, but I think that I haven't heard about it because I met many our business leaders, but I never heard that there is a debate that whether who is loser, who is winner. No, we don't face this problem at all because we are in the threshold of development. Our first aim is to how to develop the country and how to invest more and how we can implement our industry more and more. Whether it's a small or middle or large, we welcome everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Sheikh
you.
Hasina. And Tech, briefly,
Yes.
is Bangladesh entitled to extra trade access by virtue of some of the challenges it faces?
As a matter of fact, I think it's a matter of the market access. Think, for example, India. If we enlarge market access like labor and the service and which are kind of their strength. If Bangladesh has the strength to appeal to the member countries, they should talk about the market access. So, I mean, we have to redefine what is market access, and we should leverage the strength of each country. If you define its strength and the contribution to other member countries, I think that should be preferred. But that should be, applied to every country. So that's and eventually that goes to the WTO. I'm not ruling out the power of WTO. And as the last, at the end of the day, we got to reform WTO. I'm not sticking to only, RCEP. RCEP, TPP, CPTPP will come up to the reform of WTO. And in that discussion, in the conversation, we got to talk about that kind of thing as well. So what is market access for the country, for each country? I think that's a good issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very timely question, given the way that the Trump administration has just withdrawn duty-free access to the American market from India under the generalized system of preferences and is talking about it for Indonesia. With that, I'm going to wrap up. I think we've had some very interesting remarks today, whether it's Tech's comments on the feasibility of finishing up the RCEP this year, whether it's Sheikh Hasina's very interesting remarks on how she manages debt in a fast-growing economy, and also her welcome for more trade agreements with Bangladesh. Mary, with her discussion of how Canada sees opportunities in the TPP, and Sushant with his analyses of how companies are approaching all the logistical and planning challenges of dealing with all these trade agreements. Thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you all have a good dinner. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. That was excellent. Very, very